Welcome to the Life Expansion After 50 series on central nervous system recalibration, the missing link for performance after 50. What if your body isn't broken? It's just understimulated. What if your willpower hasn't faded? It's just out of sync with your nervous system. And what if what you've been chasing in supplements, diets, and even workouts isn't wrong? It's simply misdirected. Welcome to the beginning of something different. This is the first talk in a new series called Central Nervous System Recalibration. It's a process to reset, recharge, and rewire your central nervous system so that you can unlock your physical, mental performance potential. You still have and continue to have ready when you're ready to activate it, you still have the same potential that you've had in the past. It's just that it's sort of dormant. And yes, this matters whether you're an athlete, a leader, a parent, or just someone who wants to stay strong and focused in the second half of their adult life. Let me set the stage. For most of our lives, we've been taught to think of performance through one of three lenses: muscle, mindset, or motivation. And when things slow down or we hit a plateau, we're told to work harder, maybe eat cleaner, or maybe take some supplements. But there's a fourth lens that most people never learn to look through, and it's not a new muscle group or a secret pill. It's the operating system that connects your thoughts, movements, reactions, emotions, and energy. It's your central nervous system. How calibrated it is determines whether the rest of your performance fires or just fizzles. Central nervous system calibration is about reconnecting the dots between three things: the signals your brain sends, the neural pathways those signals travel through, and the physical actions or emotional responses that they produce. Now, these three links all fit under the heading of synaptogenesis. Think of it as activating existing neural pathways that are inactive due to non-use. Said another way, the synapses moves from inactive neural pathways to active neural pathways because the body wants to be efficient and is not going to produce more neurotransmitter than it perceives that it needs. When any link in that chain weakens, your body compensates by slowing down, maybe avoiding risk, or even tuning out your drive. You might feel like you've lost the ability to engage at the level that you desire, when what you've really lost is signal strength. The good news, you can rebuild that signal faster than you think. And studying high performance, especially after 50, the takeaway is this: it's not about building muscles, at least not at first. The important element is signal strength. A weak signal cannot fire the muscle to the point of failure. A strong signal requires speed and precision as well as strength. Accomplishing this requires neurotransmitters like acetylcholine and glutamate to do the heavy lifting, dopamine to set up the reward structure, and serotonin to uplift your mood so you're able to go back at it again and you can recover from any setbacks. All of these can be provided and boosted by a simple exercise protocol. While more willpower is not the target, you'll find willpower does improve because willpower correlates with heart rate variability. Not only does the protocol support neurotransmitter production, glutamate, dopamine, serotonin, and acetylcholine, it also improves heart rate variability, which has a direct correlation with willpower. And it improves a host of other functions. Think of heart rate variability as your dashboard, whereas the central nervous system calibration is the system under the hood. Together, they help you steer your life with energy and clarity and predictability. In this series, I'm going to walk through 7 specific elements that accelerate synaptogenesis, the rewiring of your neural pathways. Now, you've heard of this as neuroplasticity. What I'm doing is breaking it down and putting into terms that make sense, that we can actually apply it, and more importantly, see results within 7 days. Because once you see the results, it's hard to unsee them, and you'll start to recognize the patterns that lead to recalibration of your central nervous system. And that includes the production of key neurotransmitters that make movement easier, focus sharper, and energy more available. They're novelty, intention, precision, balance, struggle, progression, and explosiveness. And I'll go through each of these in today's session, and then we'll unpack those and more in future sessions. Now, each one of these activates the nervous system in a different way. Each one builds toward a body and brain that can still adapt, perform, and recover, even after 50. Every exercise won't include all 7. Some may only include 1 or 2, but the closer we can get to all 7 in each of the exercises, more importantly, understand why they work, then you'll be able to create your own exercises, you'll create your own protocols, and you'll make changes in your lifestyle because you have a new reward system set up. The dopamine sees that there are benefits from recalibrating the central nervous system. And just like in your 20s and 30s, when more muscle drove you to the gym, now you see that more capability drives you to these exercises. And these aren't tips, they're switches. And the reason I created this model is simple. Overall, society is spending billions of dollars chasing desired results from supplements, hacks, and quick fixes without addressing the source. If your body isn't being asked to adapt, then it won't. In fact, worse than that, it's recalibrating for ever easier times ahead, which is a problem because it's assuming the future will be less demanding than the present. So the plan is to find ways to preserve energy by not creating neurotransmitter in the future. You get the picture. If your neurotransmitters aren't activated through real world input, then no stack of capsules can replace the signal they were meant to carry. The inverse is true as well. More demands means more neurotransmitter production, but it gets better. The reason I call it calibration is because the central nervous system predicts what will be required in the future. The simple act of progressing some element of load, even in very small increments, and I recommend small increments because it eliminates the need for recovery between exercise. Even very small increments have the effect of alerting the system that greater demands are ahead. This signaling causes the body to produce more neurotransmitters. So we start here with the nervous system, with your brain's ability to send, receive, and react with your body's ability to get faster, stronger, sharper, not in spite of your age, but because you train it based on what it needs. Throughout the series, I'll repeat, test it for yourself, and provide different examples for people of all fitness levels so you can try it for yourself and experience results in a week. No placebo effect, no requirement to believe, and no major lifestyle changes other than engaging in some simple exercises for a few minutes per day. That's to test it. Sound too good to be true? It isn't. The reason is the strategy that has been hiding in plain sight is overlooked or not even on the radar. Welcome to CNS Recalibration. All right, so to set this up, we want to look at a few things. One, everything I say today, and I encourage you to do this, to Google it yourself, and when possible, test out the exercises to see the results that you get. But when you Google it, think in terms of Googling just one element. There's so much information out on the internet, and you've probably discovered it. We all go down these rabbit holes and find out there's tons of information available on a topic that you barely knew existed. The challenge is that we're talking about things that are in the neuroscience realm, the physical therapy realm, the sports training realm, fitness realm, and more. And while there is some crosstalk, the way science works is the scientists tend to do their research within their silo. So you have these multiple silos. And for example, physical therapy is more about from below the line, getting you back up to status quo. Whereas what we're talking about is moving above the line, which has similarities, but the vernacular is not really supported because we're not talking about a cure or getting back. We're talking about going higher. So when you do your searches, do it in that way. But for example, you can look up terms like synaptogenesis. What does glutamate do? What does acetylcholine do? What are the elements of the central nervous system, and what does it have to do with neurotransmitter? You can look up terms like that to see the responses that you get. The second thing I want to say is this. For years, I've said that in the 30s, we tend to slow down a little bit. In the 40s, we need, talking about age ranges, in the 40s, we need more recovery time. In the 50s, we start to lose a little bit of flexibility. In the 60s, we lose strength. And in the 70s, we start to lose mobility. And while most people agree with me on that, what isn't so obvious is that we lose these things not because of aging. We lose them because we're not putting the demand on our system. It could be for a variety of things, but just the simple thing from, we go from teenagers and 20s to where we're more active doing all sorts of things. We're burning the candle at both ends. And by being active, we're generating more neurotransmitter. In our 30s, we start to slow down, relax a little bit, focus on work, whatever it is, raising the family. And that lower demand requires less neurotransmitter. That starts a cycle, a process that causes us to start looking for relaxation, for opportunities to conserve energy. That creates another cycle of literally declining of our neurotransmitters. And the main neurotransmitters that serve us, that are generated by putting a demand on the body, dopamine, that's the reward system. That's your reward setup. So even desiring to go to the gym is easier in our 20s and 30s because we're getting feedback and we're getting stronger. So we go back again. Once that feedback starts to slow down and flatten, there's less interest in going to the gym. Well, the more neurotransmitter you have, the more dopamine you have available, and we can reignite that reward cycle. Serotonin, that's the feel good. And people think of serotonin maybe as a brain hormone. It's produced in the gut. And so the more serotonin we have, the more feel good. People chase all sorts of things for quote unquote happiness. Well, if you have more serotonin, it's going to be easier to modulate your mood. Then there's acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter. These are all I'm talking about are neurotransmitters. This is the one that conveys or transmits the message from the neural pathway to the muscle to activate it. So we have a neural pathway. In fact, let me just go to the pad and illustrate it. So let's say we have the central nervous system right here. And this central nervous system is paying attention to all kinds of things. You have the autonomic nervous system in there and the peripheral nervous system, but let's just keep it at a high level. Central nervous system. I call this like the command center. It's what keeps everything running and running smoothly, keeps us performing. And it's also predictive. It's looking ahead to see what kind of demands are possible, which is why this system that which I'll share today is so important. And let's say now that you want to lift a weight. So this desire to lift a weight goes through a neurotransmitter called glutamate. Glutamate then transfers that to a neural pathway. Now, I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm not into fitness. I'm not a physical therapist. I have nothing to do with that kind of work. I'm a business coach, and my focus is on helping business owners perform at high levels. And in order to do that, they themselves have to perform at a high level because business is throwing things at you. So what we do is we work on 7 fitness areas: mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, relationship, professional, and financial. So physical is one of those, and that's where this one comes into play. But it's a big part of it because the physicality, that's our vessel that moves us around. Now, I'm going to say there's 2 kinds of neural pathways. I'm going to draw another one down here. and I'll come back to it. So there's two, and again, it's not a neuroscience term. I'm just wanting to illustrate it in lay terms. One of the challenges when I first started going down this neuroscience path is that it gets real confusing real quick, because all new terms are introduced. Remember, scientists will dig deeper and get peer reviewed, and so the terms just keep piling on. I looked at some neuroscience books when I first embarked on this to figure out how I was going to go about it. 500 and 600 pages long, multiple books coming out in a year, similar but overlapping. Some of them are dissimilar. So there's a lot, and it's considering that mirror neurons were just formally discovered in the 80s, and myelin was understood in its present, the way we understand it presently, is something like 1980s and 90s. It was thought to be inert matter as recently as the 1950s. So when you're thinking about a brain that's 200,000 years old, it's very, very young. Neuroscience in some of these respects is very, very young. It's in infancy, right? To think about it like that. So then the neural pathway, so the glutamate is important because it's the trigger, it's the initiator of the signal along the neural pathway. Now we have 100 billion neurons, and each neuron interacts with, so these would be neurons. Each neuron interacts with 1,000 and 10,000 other neurons. So this neural pathway obviously would be hundreds of neurons, and taking a couple of steps might involve thousands of neural pathways. So obviously this is not even a scaled drawing here. And then there's this other thing that happens in here, and that's the acetylcholine. And then we have the muscle. So we have the glutamate activates or sends the signal through the neural pathway, and then that hits this junction to the it's a junction to the muscle, right? And that's where this is a neurotransmitter, and this is a neurotransmitter, and that's what activates the muscle. So if this signal is weak, this muscle is not going to get the activation it needs to lift the weight. If this signal is strong, but this signal is weak, or the transmission is weak, the muscle won't be able to lift. If this signal is strong, but this one is weak, the muscle won't be able to lift as much. So what happens is the more neurotransmitter we have, the more availability we have for the glutamate, the more availability we have for the acetylcholine, and the more availability we have for the dopamine and the serotonin. And there are other neurotransmitters that come into play as well. The reason I drew this one down here is because there's something that happens with deep practice. And if you look up anything around neuroplasticity, you can search neuroplasticity and deep practice, and what you'll find is deep practices struggling on the edge of ability. Daniel Coyle wrote a great book, The Talent Code, and he goes into deep to myelin, goes into deep practice, but he introduces myelin in a very effective, understandable way. And then there's also Grit by Angela Duckworth. She does a nice job of helping you understand the kinds of exercises that lead to deep practice, whereas Talent Code tends to be more focused on physical activity. I think Grit is a little bit broader, and you can see how it applies to thought as well. So what happens is, if you have deep practice, these neurons get wrapped with myelin. And there's more active synapses, right? Compared to a regular neural pathway without the deep practice, you have smaller synapses there, or less synapses involved. What can happen is this neural pathway stops being used. Let's say you used to play football and you've stopped. So you have a lot of, and let's say you were playing competitively, you have a lot of neurons in those potential neural pathways that have myelin, but there's no synapses there. There's no synapses because you haven't been using it. What's nice about it is without use, and by the way, this is sort of a self-reinforcing problem because by the time we're 50, if I look at muscle atrophy, and this is not a drawn to scale or representative graph, it's just figuratively explaining it. If I were to look at atrophy of a muscle, let's say that muscle atrophies like this. But what I will tell you is part of this is muscle atrophy, and part of it is neurotransmitter atrophy, neural pathway atrophy. So if your neural pathway drops like this, and your muscle is actually a little bit stronger like that, working on the muscle is not going to do nearly as much as working on the neurotransmitter. And what's nice about the neurotransmitter is that it can come up back to stasis in 1 to 3 days. So what I used to think of as stabilizer muscle strengthening was actually the activation of the stabilizer muscle. This is like in the beginning of ski season, bicycling, any activity that you do, going back to lifting weights. That first day feels awkward. You feel like I don't even want to bother. 2 or 3 days later, it's coming back. Skiing is a great example because if you go for a week, by the third day, you're almost back to where you were at the end of the last season, whereas the first day you felt like you barely skied before. So this is important because the neurotransmitter can come back up very quickly, and the muscle atrophy does not go down as much as we thought. Now, back to this. This left alone, these neurons stay there. What I was going to say is that they continue to stay wrapped with myelin. The synapses goes away, but the myelin stays. Now, myelin does break down with age, so it's two different things, right? Day to day, without use, the myelin is not going to have any breakdown would be negligible. But as you approach 50 and 60, the myelin does start to break down, but it's breaking down with age. But if you put demands on your body, you see the self-reinforcing process there. If you put demands on the body, the myelin won't break down as much. Now, if this happens, and now it's not so much the muscle atrophied, but the neural pathways atrophied, you're sitting like this. Well, we can get the myelin back up. And by getting the myelin back up, not the myelin, we can get the synapses back up. That's synaptogenesis. We can get the synaptogenesis to come back online. And now we have synapse again, which turns this into a neural pathway. Now, if you think it through and you take a neural pathway that has less myelin, in other words, there wasn't a lot of deep practice, it wasn't a deep thought, but a person played competitive sports, maybe professional sports or college level sports. So they have a lot of myelin on their neurons. Reactivating them with the synapses can go a long way. And if at 50, you start looking back at some of the things you like to do as a teenager or in your 20s, physical I'm talking about, and start leaning back into them, you can actually experience this. So this is why this works. After 50, and 50, I'm using 50 as an arbitrary number. The podcast or the program is Life Expansion After 50. I would say you can notice it's starting in the 40s, but it's masked because in the 40s, if your muscle atrophy was at this point, the neurotransmitter may have been decreasing much more slowly. But after 50, the muscle atrophy may be like this, but your neurotransmitter drops down like that. And that's because of year after year after year after not use. So you may have heard that, we drop dopamine a percentage every decade. I think it's 14% a decade. We drop testosterone like 1% every year. So that just accumulates and we end up being here. And by 50, because of the less and less and less demand, we're down in the basement. By putting demand on there, we can turn that around. So that's the That I'll be talking about more of that in the future sessions. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds because we'll lose the basic concept. Now let's take a look at want to take a look at go through a slide and look at the 7 elements that contribute to neurotransmitter production. All right, now I have 7 elements for neurotransmitter production. Now, what I didn't talk about is that when we learned, most of us, when we learned about exercising and getting stronger, et cetera, we learned about going to failure, you learned about having a recovery day, et cetera. And that is true. But here we're not developing muscle, we're developing neurotransmitters. So it's very different. Number one, we don't have to go to failure. We need intention, we need focus and progression. Number two, we don't need that recovery day because we're not tearing down muscle. We're signaling, we're working on the signals. And so recovery could be measured in minutes, maybe hours, but at the most overnight. Most of the exercises we talk about don't even need recovery. But if you're going after some goal or you've got some objective to achieve greater than a baseline, then overnight rest would be good just because you can be fresh. But it's not like you have diminishing returns where, for example, if you're sprinting and you're sprinting every other day and going all out, it's only going to be a few weeks before you have diminishing returns. Same thing with max lift. Anybody does max lifting, a max lift knows that they should wait a week in between. It's not like that. But the thing is, you can't really do a true max lift without having a strong enough signal. Remember, we need the glutamate, the synaptogenesis in the neural pathway, and we need the acetylcholine to make that happen. And the serotonin and the dopamine keep us in the game and keep the reward structure going. So we have the 7 elements for neurotransmitter production. The way I've got the slide set up, as you can see, the element, the neural function, and the comments. And I try to keep the terms basic, but there are going to be new terms, and you can always look them up. I will not introduce I overlook many terms, or I should say exclude many terms, because when you start getting into neuroscience, it goes super deep. And even the motor units and the physical therapy type conversation, they can go pretty deep. So the element, that's the characteristic to include with the exercise. I have 7 of them. They're easy to remember. I use a mnemonic that might help you as well. And once you understand that, you can create your own. I do have a Facebook page, Life Expansion After 50, and there's a group that I'm activating on Facebook, Life Expansion After 50, where people will be able to go and put in your own results, put in your posts, and we can have some comparisons and some dialogue. It's a community for people over 50 who want to make the second half of their adult life the best half. And you'll find that there's many, many people doing bits and pieces, some all of it, but by pulling that together and understanding it as a community, we'll all get better. The second one, the neural function, as I said, that's the direct beneficiary of the exercise. So you can start to see, I can work on dopamine this way, and I can work on acetylcholine with this one, and all of them help with heart rate variability. Then the comments is just why it creates the adaptation. So this is all, you could almost think about this as like mini evolution. What we're doing is forcing and leading the adaptation. All right, the first one, novelty. It has to be new. So anything new, and by the way, when you start looking at the way the central nervous system works, you can go back and look at the hunter-gatherer time, because a lot of it goes back to that. And the reason I bring that up, if you are in a hunter-gatherer environment, you can imagine walking into a clearing, or you climb a hill and now you're looking over into the valley. You can imagine how the person would be scanning around for what's going on. So anytime we run into a new situation, we're going to have heightened awareness. There's data out there that says even if you walk through a doorway, we tend to heighten our awareness because it's just so ingrained in us. If you didn't do that, you didn't survive, right? I mean, you've got to look at the new, it's like kind of like reading the room, but you have to look at the new landscape, find out where the tigers are. So it has to be new. And this helps with the glutamate and directly helps with the brain function. And it's the catalyst for synaptogenesis. You can think of BDNF as directly responsible for some of the neuroplasticity that happens. And then we have intention. So you want to have some intention around what is the exercise I'm doing. So if you're doing a push-up, it's not just doing the push-up. You may have heard bodybuilders talk about this. They want to concentrate, they want to visualize the movement. Some of them even look at the body part that they're exercising. They might use a mirror, especially when they're posing. There's a lot of intention that goes in there. And this is not to be confused with context. So I want to break that out as intention is on the exercise itself. The context is having that greater context that makes you, that drives you forward. So for example, I want to be able to be a stronger skier this winter, or I'm planning on going on vacation. I want to look good at the beach, whatever. That is that's context. That's context to get you doing the activity, but intention is the detail part of it, what you're actually doing. So there's glutamate, and dopamine. So remember, the glutamate is the initiator. The dopamine is the reward system that keeps us going. So intention, you can see how that's going to help your initiation of it. And then dopamine, a lot of this is if you don't use it, you lose it. So the more we use it, the more we activate these systems, the more neurotransmitter is going to be produced. The cortical engagement, think of that as a precursor to adrenaline, like cortisol, getting us ready. We don't want to be into fight or flight, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But this reinforces the reward pathways. Then we have precision. This gets into the acetylcholine and cerebral type loops. This is the feedback. So if you think about turning a doorknob with a lot of intention, that's acetylcholine, even though it's not hard or anything, but you're focusing on precision, turning it at a certain rate, stopping at a certain point. And the cerebellar loops is that you're getting feedback to see how you're doing it. So it's real-time feedback. And this supports fine motor control and real-time improvement. But again, it pushes acetylcholine. And if you remember in the diagram, acetylcholine is the space, occupies the space between the neural pathway and the muscle. And so there's just a small amount of real estate used up by the acetylcholine. And so it's important to get that in there. So we want to do enough exercises to drive acetylcholine. We have balance, and you can do this anywhere. Standing on a curb, you're waiting for somebody, you can stand on one leg. You don't have to be obvious about it. Just pick up one foot slightly. And you can do exercises. If you're doing curls, you can do that on one foot. And I should mention, none of this is suggesting that you replace what you're doing already at the gym. This is in addition to. This is going to make your gym workouts better. If you're not going to the gym at all, this will improve. If you are going to the gym, this will help improve. So I would not stop your gym exercises unless you want to do some testing to prove it for yourself or to see where it fits for yourself. But think of it as augmenting your gym, but it's different because in the gym, you're typically exercising or developing muscle. This is about developing the central nervous system. That's the big difference. And so balance, again, acetylcholine and proprioception. Proprioception is awareness of where the joints are. If you ever are skiing or you do some sport and you fall and it's seasonal, for skiing comes up in mind. I mean, sometimes at the beginning of the season, I have trouble putting on my snowboard. It's a weird thing. You're sitting there trying to put on the snowboard and it's like awkward. It's awkward because there's no, and this is a layman's way of thinking about it, there's no synapses in between those neural pathways. Those neural pathways have been inactive. They're not firing. And so that awkwardness is exactly that. And then the next day I can put my snowboard on fine. What happened? Well, the body understood what was going on. The central nervous system, the command center understood what was going on. It starts sending some acetylcholine in there. It starts the synaptogenesis process. Second day, I can put my board on fine and my moves are coming back. by the third day, I feel like, okay, this is where I should be. So you can see that apply in any kind of seasonal sport. It may be there for 30 and 40-year-olds, but I don't think it's as pronounced as it would be 50, 60, 70. And that proprioception, it even applies to getting up. If you don't get on the floor often enough, you're not going to experience getting up. And that first time you fall on the floor, you may have seen this where somebody's trying to get up and they don't know where to put their limbs. They're trying to put their hands down and they're trying different things as nothing's working. The neural pathways are just not firing. There's more to it than that. But I would say it looks like they're too weak. But I would argue if they just spent a little bit of time in its progression, I'll talk about that in a minute, but getting up, getting down on the floor and getting back up, they'll actually be able to get up more easily in the future. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a physical therapist. So anything I'm telling you, you have to go through your own filter of deciding, should you even try this? Maybe see your doctor if you haven't exercised. Don't take my word for it on that. I'm not here to tell you where the risks are. I'm just telling you how the system is set up and what has worked for me, coming from ranger school, martial arts, motorcycle racing, different things, skiing, snowboarding, tennis, and seeing these patterns play out, training with Navy SEALs. You see patterns, and it's sort of like a filter that everything goes through to see, does this check? Does this pass that test? And what I'm telling you is this 100% aligned. I can vouch for that. So the balance requires coordination, reflex, timing, and the sensory feedback. What's nice about balance is you get feedback immediately. Walking on curbs, anything like that is going to be good for that. And then we have struggle. This is struggle on the edge of ability. So whereas when you're building muscle, you want to go to failure. When we're working on neurotransmitter production, we want to struggle on the edge of ability. And that's deep practice. You can just Google deep practice. You can start learning a lot about it. I think Angela Duckworth's book, as I said, Grit, does a good job, as does Daniel Coyle's Talent Code. They explain deep practice, how to apply it. Talent Code is more athletics, and then Angela Duckworth's book is a broader view. But that drives the glutamate and the epinephrine. And that epinephrine, again, is helping the system function more effectively. So it strengthens signal intensity, and the epinephrine is like a precursor to adrenaline. And you don't want the adrenaline, but that heightened state, this is struggle on the edge of ability. So you're not kicking into the cortisol, you're not kicking into the adrenaline. You don't want that neurobiological event to happen, but it's preparing. And that's where that intention comes up. So the central nervous system, or the command center, is taking note that, hey, this is important. Let's start putting some neurotransmitter over there. What's going on? And we have progression. And this is one of those areas that you can test it for yourself. I would encourage you to do this. If you are fit and you've been exercising for a while, do a simple exercise. Make an assessment of about how many push-ups you think you can do. You don't want to go to max, because then you'll have to recover. But if you have an idea of how many push-ups you can do, and if you do want to test it out, just skip the next day. So take your maximum number of push-ups. Hold on a second. I'm going to write this down so you can see it. Take the max push-ups, multiply it by 20%. So let's say you can do 20 push-ups. By 20%, that's going to be 4. And what you'll do is the next day, do 4 push-ups. That's day 1. Day 2, you add 1, do 5 push-ups. Day 3, you do 6 push-ups, and so on. You just add 1 per day. And so it would take you a little over 2 weeks to get back to 20 push-ups. But what'll happen is when you get to that point of 20 push-ups, you'll probably be able to do 40. Everybody's going to be different. It depends on how active you are and how many push-ups you could do in your prime. If you were able to do, 100 push-ups in your prime, that number is probably going to go up a lot higher. If you've never done more than 20 push-ups, because that means you don't have the muscle capability there. So remember, this progression, adding one a day, has nothing to do with tearing down the muscle. It has everything to do with generating neurotransmitter, including the glutamate and the acetylcholine, which makes the muscle activate or trigger the muscle. So the adding one a day is communicating to the command center, the central nervous system, that these demands are going up every day. We better start flooding the system with neurotransmitter, and that's going to give you other benefits as well. So more neurotransmitter improves testosterone, estrogen for women, testosterone for men, estrogen for women after menopause, serotonin, dopamine, acetylcholine, HGH, human growth hormone, and mitochondria. So there's quite a bit. But yeah, and that's one example. Now, let's say you're not fit. What you can do is sit down in a chair and get up and notice, are you using any assistance? Are you using your hands on the chair? Are you putting your hands on your knees? Are you using the table? And whatever it is that you're doing, 3 times a day for the next 7 days, reduce the amount of assistance. Let's say you were using 2 arms to get up. Maybe a couple of times you use just one arm and then use the other arm to get up. Arm of the chair, hand, right? One hand and then the other hand. And then after you've done that a few times, maybe get up just putting your hands on your knees. What you want to do is slightly change the incremental effort. Small. This is not about failure. It's not building a muscle. You're not trying to get stronger. We're activating the neurotransmitter. This chair exercise is great because, and if you can't get up with just one hand, then you could do it in reverse by sitting down. Let's say you've been using 2 hands on the chair to sit down, or maybe you go a little bit and you plop down. What you can do is use 2 hands to sit down and then use one hand to sit down a few times. And when I say a few times, do it 2 or 3 times on one day, 2 or 3 times the next day, maybe 2 or 3 times the next day with one hand, depending on how you feel. And then take that away and maybe use 2 hands on your knees to sit down, slowing it down. And then maybe one hand on your knees, on one knee, and then leaning forward to sit down. I'll put a demonstration on the, I'll put a demonstration in the podcast, and this videos in the podcast, and I'll also add one as a post tomorrow. So I'll do the chair post, and that'll post tomorrow on these same pages. So if you're watching it on Facebook, it'll be there. If you're watching it on LinkedIn, it'll be there. But the chair is a good exercise because if you're not fit at all, now here's why this is so important. Let's say you're 60 years old, and let's say you notice that you're using the hands on the arms of the chair to get up. In the back of your mind, you might be thinking this is the way it's going to be for the rest of your life. You are now resigned to using your arms because you can't get up anymore, and you can't build any muscle, so it's not working. Recognizing that it's signal and not muscle, and you work on the signal, if in 1 week you can get up without using your hands, that's a game changer. That means that if I can change it on the chair, I can change it with other things too. But more importantly, you can keep standing up and sitting down without using help. And that's going to activate more neurotransmitter. It's going to activate more and require more acetylcholine. And not only that, you can then start using your legs more, and using your legs creates movement for the lymphatic fluid. Lymphatic fluid does not have a pump, so it moves because we move. And if you're sedentary, you're not moving the lymphatic fluid, and lymphatic fluid is there to help clean out the blood and keep the organs working well, and removing oxidative waste and those things, which all contribute to what we think of as aging. So again, it's back to demand. So again, if you're fit, try the push-up thing. And it doesn't make sense. It's not going to make logical sense to you to only do 20% of your max, and you're not going to get anything from muscle. You're not tearing down any fibers. There's no recovery. There's no rebuilding, but there's more neurotransmitter. And you go from the body making this much neurotransmitter to projecting that this much is needed. And all that neurotransmitter is going to help do the things like I mentioned: serotonin, dopamine, testosterone, human growth hormone, human growth hormone, mitochondria, etc. And that is now available. And so let me get back to my slide, because we're just about through that. And now let's see. So that was the progression. We were talking about the progression, and that's going to help with synaptogenesis and reinforcement. So the progression, doing a little bit more each day. It's like at the beginning of the season. The first day, you're drilling just basic turns, and you go to a steeper run, and you're linking turns. Then you're doing short radius turns. You're forcing yourself to step up. Maybe on snowboarding, you're keeping your weight forward towards the nose. You're keeping your weight forward towards the nose, and then you're carving harder. Whatever it is that you're doing and progressing, that is going to speed it up. It's going to speed up the synaptogenesis, which is the synapses moving back to those neural pathways that are dormant. So this solidifies the pathways. And then the dopamine provides the reward because you see some improvement. And that's a big part of this process, is that now you actually see improvement from working out. I'll get into the exercises in the next talk. It's too much to do now, but I'm going to post one exercise of a 5 to 7 minute routine that I do in the morning. It takes 5 to 7 minutes, and each day I'll post a different exercise. And then after 7 or 8 days, I'll pull it all together and demonstrate it real time. So you'll see that it's all done in less than 5 to 7 minutes. It's just one rep, one set, and one time through. It's not about building muscle. It's about activating neurotransmitter, waking up the body, etc. And then we have explosiveness. So this is where sprinting comes in. And by the way, sprinting gets all of this. Maybe not so much the novelty, but you can introduce novelty by sprinting on a different path. Maybe sprinting on a different track, maybe sprinting in a turn, maybe sprinting uphill, maybe sprinting downhill. You can add novelty to sprinting, and sprinting hits all 7. But the challenge with sprinting is that you should only do it once a week, because you very quickly hit diminishing returns, because it's an overall body thing. It actually reduces your heart rate variability temporarily. Your mood may take a hit on a day for one day. So it's not something you're going to be able to do every day. But I started with sprinting over a decade and a half ago for fitness, to speed up, to get faster on the marathon, and then learned all the benefits of sprinting and wanted to do it more frequently. And one of the things I came across was footwork drills. And then there's this thing called fartlek, F-A-R-T-L-E-K. It means speed play. It's a Swiss word. It means speed play. But that's another way to add some explosiveness and progression and struggle and balance and precision and intention and novelty. So footwork drills actually hit all of this. Sprinting hits it in a big way. Footwork drills hit it in a small way. What's nice about footwork drills, I can do those every single day, as long as I'm not too big on the explosiveness. The more you go into the explosiveness, the more you're going to need to take a break. So that's it. I'm going to leave it there. I will, and the live will stay wherever you're watching. It'll be available to you. And then I'm going to do another one. Today's Friday. I'll do another one next week that introduces and talks about more of the exercises and some of the dynamics in terms of how to start designing your own exercise, your own protocol. All right, there you go. We'll see you next time. Feel free to drop some questions, and I'll answer them in the next live event. One more thing, remember, you can check out Life Expansion After 50 podcast, Instagram, Facebook group, and Facebook page. The group will be activated next week. The Facebook page is there now. And you'll be able to find some of the exercises on the Facebook page. Life Expansion After 50.